maybe for like general population, former athletes, maybe what are some supplements you recommend, and then also what to look for when actually selecting a specific brand?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say generally across the board. So when you think about supplements, you kind of have to think of it in two different categories. I like to split it up. So you have categories that meet nutrient needs. That's like one category. Just meet your nutrient needs. And that's like, when people talk about supplements are supplements, they fill the gaps. They are not your diet. That's what these fall into. So I would say unless you are on a coast and you eat fish twice a week, fatty fish, you probably should be supplementing with omega-3s because otherwise, unless you eat a ton of chia seeds and flax seeds, which you really can't because if you did that, you'd be pooping your brains out all the time. And it's an inferior source of omega-3 as opposed to DHA and EPA. You probably should be on an omega-3 supplement. And just a multivitamin would probably be the other one that across the board, I would feel pretty comfortable recommending for anyone for just general health performance, whether you're an athlete or not. Um, those would be probably the two. Cause like even a vitamin D, I would be a little cautious on. Like for our purposes, being in the Midwest and honestly for most of the year getting almost zero sunlight exposure, you could probably be pretty safe on vitamin D, but like otherwise, I would want to know vitamin D blood level before like blanket recommending that. So that's why I wouldn't recommend it wholesale. Um, magnesium is often uh, suggested too, which is probably fine. That's another one where it's like, okay, what's in your multi if you're taking a multi? And then are you getting any foods that are high in magnesium? Most of us do not because Americans are awful at eating green leafy vegetables and we don't really eat pumpkin seeds. So magnesium would also be a fairly safe bet, but I wouldn't say a blanket for everybody. Now, as athletes, I mean, creatine would probably be the one. And I mean, I would throw honestly, I consider creatine a health supplement anymore. I don't consider it performance only supplement because we know that creatine honestly just makes most of your bodily systems function better because it's an energy source that's readily available that we can use anaerobically. So brain, heart, obviously muscle. So that would be another one I would say could honestly be most athletes if you would benefit from creatine supplementation. Um, Honestly, outside of that, there's not much as far as like, I mean, there's a lot you can recommend situationally, but as far as like what most people could take, should take that would benefit them, that's honestly like the base list I would give. Do you want to go into that anymore? Any questions on that, or like we could go into
With
the supplement thing?
with magnesium, do you have preference over like 3 and 8 glycinate, citrate?
It's not
Any?
oxide,
Yeah.
honestly, just not oxide. Like those, so like glycinate, 3 and 8, malates, all these other forms that magnesium is bonded to, they might have minor effects. Citrate would be another one. So like sometimes they get tied to like an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is 3/8 the one that crosses the blood-brain barrier? I think
Yeah.
that's the one that like if you want like
Mhm.
cognitive effects, take that one. If you want energy support, take the citrate. If you want sleep support, take the glycinate, that kind of thing. But just don't do oxide, magnesium oxide, because it's so not bioavailable that whatever you get on the label, you're probably not absorbing the vast majority of it. So just, I would say don't do oxide.
Are there any things you look for in like a multivitamin that you would prefer one over the other when looking?
Oh man, that's a good question because it's a lot to ask people to become familiar with forms of things, just like we
Mm-hmm.
just talked about. Most people, because it's easy to say like, oh, just look at the RDA, the daily value percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Those vary widely, and almost all of them are going to be pretty dang potent for the water soluble vitamins. Fat soluble vitamins and minerals are kind of all over the place. I will say what I typically do when evaluating a multi is the first thing I look at is vitamin D. If their vitamin D is like meaningless, meaning like the dosage is meaningless to actually impact, it's probably not a very potent vitamin, a multivitamin. So I typically like to see at least like 1,000 IUs of vitamin D per serving on a multi. And then I feel pretty confident the rest of it's properly dosed. But I would say for those of us in the field, just make sure that the vitamins and mineral forms are the active forms, or the forms that some form of the one that will get used in the body. So like for vitamin D, that'd be cholecalciferol. For vitamin B12, that'd be cobalamin. But like B5 is pyridoxal phosphate. So like that's a lot to ask the general person to look at. The other thing would just be just some semblance of third-party testing. That's really the best you can do. And that would be like informed choice, NSF testing. If you see like USP is another one that's on a lot of vitamins in particular, because they do like single ingredient testing, whereas the other two are just the whole thing. Because they will do potency testing to make sure that it's close to meeting label claims. But here's what I would not look for in a multi. Don't look for it to have all the extra crap, because so many multis they'll have their vitamin and their mineral blend, and they'll have these like little extra things like antioxidant blend, digestive enzyme blend, sexual virility support. And I have never seen a blend like that be any more than just a little sprinkling of stuff that will have zero impact. So if it has like a lot of extra blends, proprietary blends, matrices, I would pass on it and just make sure that it's the core vitamins and minerals only.
How about as far as like prebiotic, probiotic, symbiotic, any of those?
Oh man, that is a fantastic question, because that one I used to have as like maintenance, like have it all the time as like a maintenance thing. But through the talking with professionals in that industry, that tends to not be what they recommend. They want it to be only if you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're still don't know, we're still honestly trying to tease out what the minimum threshold is for actually impacting your microbiome. Because if you look at a probiotic supplement, it'll typically have the dosage will be in what's called colony forming units, or CFUs. And no matter which one you pick up, it looks like a ton, like so many million or so many billion CFUs. We were dropping that into an environment that has trillions of bacteria. So even if that thing has millions of CFUs, that's a drop in the ocean. And so that's where like strains matter, targeted strains, like what is the ecosystem of your microbiome? Like what strains are prevalent, which strains are not, are any of them pathogenic? And this is actually kind of timely, because I just had a consult literally earlier this week on a stool test that I did, which was pretty interesting, because I could see what strains in my gut were low, which ones. So if you're unfamiliar, some of our microbiome or bacteria in our gut can synthesize their own vitamins from things that go through your digestive system. They can make short chain fatty acids that then get absorbed into the bloodstream that have various effects. And like I could see which B5 producing bacteria were low, or B12 producing bacteria were low in my gut. I could see which ones were linked to immunity. So that would give you the most targeted way to supplement with probiotics. And I'll fully say I am not up to speed on like which ones those are yet, because we're still learning so stinking much about it. But don't be surprised if you did like take a probiotic and didn't really notice much of anything. So that's really the best answer I can give right now. I will say, if you can, when you're looking at a probiotic supplement, try to make sure that it says something about being spore-based, That's probably the biggest piece of advice I've gotten over like the past year or so. It actually came from my podcast. So if you go to Lacey Hall's episode, she was my probiotic expert that I had on. And if it's not a spore-based probiotic, that means it likely will be killed in your stomach because of the hydrochloric acid. So spore-based means it ensures that it gets through your stomach and small intestine and actually reaches large intestine where your microbiome largely lives.